we go.
Hello everyone, this is the 5th Ethical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and today is September 22nd, 2013. And today we're going to continue our study with God, on the Forward with God the Absolute, and that is on page 13.4, or the Forward, section 10, paragraph 1. And thank you for joining us. Let's have a little prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for such a beautiful day outside today, and thank you for bringing us together that we might study this wonderful revelation you've given us. We thank you for the knowledge we receive from it, and we thank you for the guidance every day. We pray that you'll watch over each of our families and open our hearts and our minds today, that we might learn something to take with us and teach others. And we try to keep in mind that what we do is for the service of you. We appreciate it very much. We thank you for the opportunity to serve you, and thank you for the many blessings you bestow on us every single day. We love you, Father. We give you the praise, and we love you, our Creator, Son Michael, and Creator Mother Spirit. And we thank each of you for the sacrifices you make each and every day for us. We thank you and we give you the praise in your Son's name, Michael, Jesus of Nazareth. Amen. Okay, God the Absolute. I believe we can probably get through the rest of the Forward today. We'll give it a shot. Anyway, okay. Are you there yet? No?
God
Linda?
the Absolute.
Huh? Got you there?
Yeah.
Why don't you start? And then we'll go around this way.
There are many features of the eternal reality of Deity Absolute, which cannot be fully explained to the time-space finite mind. But the actualization of God the Absolute would be in consequence of the unification of the second experiential Trinity, the Absolute Trinity. This would constitute the experiential realization of absolute divinity, the unification of absolute meanings on absolute levels. But we are not certain regarding the encompassment of all absolute values, since we have at no time been informed that the qualified absolute is the equivalent of the infinite. Super-ultimate destinies are involved in absolute meanings and infinite spirituality, and without both of these unachieved realities, we cannot establish absolute values.
Okay, so let's take a quick look at what they're talking about. Let's go over the experiential trinities first, okay? The first one would be the ultimate trinity, right? Okay, including all these involve God the Supreme, okay? And basically what we're talking about here is this is the first, this would be the second level of the experiential trinity, and this down here would be the third, okay? So what they're talking about here is the second level, okay? The qualified absolute they mention here, okay? And it involves the supreme, the qualified absolute, and the eventuated ultimate. So they can't say whether this, what they're saying here is they can't say whether this absolute is actually part of the infinite, part of God, or a separate part of God itself. In other words, it doesn't include, since it's qualified, in other words, it's the mixture of the deity and experience in essence. And it's that glue that brings the unqualified I'm getting off the wrong track here. It's part of that trinity that brings the universal absolute, the qualified absolute, and the unqualified absolute together, right? So if you look at the qualified absolute in the second experiential deity and the experiential destiny absolutes, okay, it's part of that also. You see that? On this chart. And it is the deity part that brings the universal absolute in connection with the qualified absolute. The qualified absolute being non-deity, right? The universal absolute, however, is deity, okay? So these two deities, basically, the universal brings the unqualified and the qualified together, Okay? It makes the possibility of those two to communicate, really. Okay? So that's what we're talking about here, this qualified absolute. All right. And it says, at no time have they been informed that the qualified absolute, okay, is equivalent of the infinite. And who would be the infinite? That would be the I am, the Father, right? God the Father. So, plus the fact that this qualified absolute is one of what? He is one of the 7 absolutes, isn't he? 7 absolutes being God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, the Paradise Isle, qualified absolute, the universal absolute, and the unqualified absolute. But the interesting part of this is this. The original 3 parts of deity, okay, are existential, aren't they? So is the other 3, the qualified, universal, and unqualified. But, there's a big but here. These 3 deities of destiny are part of experiential destiny. You see that? So unlike God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, they gain a great deal from what? The Supreme, the experiential part of the Supreme. Which God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit doesn't need because they're existential. You follow me? Okay, so that's pretty important. It brings that part of them together. Okay? And it says here, it says the absolute being in consequence of the unification of the second experiential trinity, the absolute trinity. This would constitute the experiential realization of absolute divinity, the unification of absolute meanings on absolute values. But we are not certain regarding the encompassing of all absolute values. Okay? So they are totally not sure either. They can teach us what they know, but there's things they don't even understand, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Diane, would you take the next one? I'm going to find it right. Oh, let me show you a couple slides. This is what I was just showing you. See, this is the evolved Supreme Being. This is the absolute Trinity, the eventuated ultimate. Okay? That's how, this is the absolute Trinity. Okay? Also, they go into, on this slide, the mechanism of the Master Universe is twofold, which concerns eternity relationships. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Supreme are eternal, the existential beings. While God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and God the Absolute are actualizing deity personalities of the post-Havana epics of time and space transcendent spheres. The Master Universe evolutionary expansion. These actualizing deity personalities are future eternals from the time when and as they are power personalized and growing universes by the technique of the experiential actualization of the associative creative potentials of the eternal paradise deities. Okay, so here's the original 3 deities, right? This is the Havana and the space bodies, all that surround it. This is God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and God the Absolute. And what they're trying to show this is the post-Havana epic. And these 3, God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and God the Absolute, are actualizing deities, right? Supreme is actualizing with what? The 7 super universes, right? God the Ultimate and God the Ultimate with the outer space levels, and God the Absolute into all of eternity. Okay? That was an interesting slide. And this again is the Absolute Trinities. We just went over this. It's in the slides. Okay, let's go on.
God the Absolute is the realization, attainment, goal of all super-absolute beings. But the power and personality potential of the deity absolute transcends our concept, and we hesitate to discuss those realities which are so far removed from experiential actualization.
So they don't even want to discuss it with us because they don't know, right? It's so far out there. I don't even know. Okay. All right, let me figure out the next one. Let's go to the next section, the three absolutes.
11, the three absolutes.
Jill's on
Oh, that's right, I forgot Jill.
Hey, Jill.
You want to take the next one, the three absolutes?
Yeah, I can try if the audio quality is good enough.
What was
Can
it?
you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure can.
Okay, the three absolutes. When the combined thought of the universal Father and the eternal Son, functioning in the God of action, constituted the creation of the divine and central universe, the Father followed the expression of his thought into the word of his Son and the act of their conjunct executive by differentiating his Havona presence from the potentials of infinity. And these undisclosed infinity potentials remain space concealed in the unqualified absolute and divinely enshrouded in the deity absolute, while these two become one in the functioning of the universal absolute, the unrevealed infinity unity of the paradise Father.
Okay, so when God created the Son, basically, he split himself and created the Son, and the Son became the Word of God, right? Right. And their act together created the conjoint actor, which when he created the Son, paradise appeared, and as a conjoint actor appeared, so did what? Havona, right? Okay, and it goes on to say that he differentiating his Havona present from the potentials of infinity. What does it mean? In other words, he divided himself so that he was no longer only himself into infinity. He created an action. He created a vehicle where he could continually divide himself and split himself and spread his love throughout all the universes. Right? Basically. Okay. And they say these the presence of the unqualified absolute and divinely enshrouded in the deity absolute, and they become functioning as one unit through the universal absolute and into the unrevealed infinity unity of the paradise Father. So the first three absolutes, of the seven, are the reason we can do this, and they have some pretty good. I have some pretty good slides for this. Let me see if I can. Okay. This is the picture of paradise, all right, and the spheres surrounding paradise, and this is the seven layers of Havona, right? And you can see here that he's got Father's Havona presence, right? All right. It says Father's infinite potential total area. You see that? Finite Havona present, undiminished. In other words, he is finitely involved in Havona in just this area, right? But his infinite potential is totally undiminished. Keeps going on forever, right? So what's that mean? He's finished in what? Havona and paradise, right? He's leaving it up to his deities to complete what he started, right? Paradise being perfect, Havona being just less than perfect, right? Absonite, right? And the potential is what? The finite, and everything that comes after that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go on one more here. This is an interesting slide too. Here we have, basically, it shows God's presence in all the total creation, okay? Let's start out with the deity part. This is the deity absolute. We've gone over this before, right? That is the deity part of the three absolutes. Then we have the non-deity part. That's the unqualified absolute. That's what prepares the outer space levels, right? And then we have the universal absolute, okay? And the universal absolute is the unrevealed infinity unity of the Father. Why does it say infinity unity? Because it's this that brings this and this together. You see that? And without the three, you do not have the whole. That makes sense? Good picture for that. All right, let's go one more. All right. And this shows the creation of the seven absolutes, and you can kind of understand why these are considered absolutes. First, there was God the Father, right? He split himself, made God the Son. Together, they created the Spirit. At the same time, Paradise and Avona appeared, right? Then, immediately, as far as back as anybody can tell, the deity absolute appeared, the universal absolute appeared, and the unqualified absolute. Now, for Havona to appear, what do we have to have? We have to have the unqualified absolute, don't we? Because what prepared that space area of Havona? The unqualified absolute. Then the deity absolute steps in for the deity, and the universal absolute brings the deity into the what? Non-deity. Even in Havona. Now this same thing continues on in what? The seven super universes and the universes past that. Right? Okay. Alright, let's keep going here. Three absolutes. We get the right mouse here. Okay.
Both potency of cosmic force and potency of spirit force are in the progress of progressive revelation realization as the enrichment of all reality is affected by experiential growth and through the correlation of the experiential with the existential by the universal absolute. By virtue of the equipoising presence
Equipoising, like equiposition. Yeah.
presence of the universal absolute, the first source and center realizes extension of experiential power, enjoys identification with his evolutionary creatures, and achieves expansion of experiential deity on the levels of supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness.
Okay, so you take mind force, you take spirit force, right? Who we get the mind from? Infinite Spirit. Who we get the spirit from? The Son, right? Okay. And through experiential growth, where does that come from? The Supreme, right? And the experiential with the existence of the existential of the universal absolute. So it's the universal absolute that brings the non-deity, the deity together, right? And by this equiposing force, right? These two extremes, the universal absolute brings it all together, okay? And by doing that, it allows the first source and center of God the Father to realize the extension of his experiential power identifying with his evolutionary creatures who are who? Us. So it's by doing this, he allowed a what? A stage for all of his beings to live, right? And that's what allows us to make contact with deity. Because without that, we would be what? Stuck out here in the unqualified absolute, because there would be no deity to contact, right? You know these people that believe there's no God? That's what it would be, right? It would be a non-creation, right? Okay, let's keep on here. Get right on here. The next one. Done?
When it is not possible fully to distinguish the deity absolute from the unqualified absolute, their supposedly combined function or coordinated presence is designated the action of the universal absolute.
Okay, so when you can't determine between this and this, what is it? It's this. Make sense? Is the connection between the two. If you can't call it deity and you can't call it non-deity, then what is it? It's in between. So you have to think of this, the universal absolute, as a magnetic force bringing everything here and everything here into here together. Right? All right. Let's keep going.
The deity absolute seems to be the all-powerful activator. while the unqualified absolute appears to be the all-efficient mechanizer of the supremely unified and ultimately co-coordinated universe of universes, even universes upon universes, made, making, and yet to be made.
Okay, so the deity absolute is the what? Activator of everything deity, right? The unqualified absolute is the efficient mechanizer. Did y'all catch that? So what the unqualified absolute does is it takes primordial matter and what? Manipulates it. Do you need deity for that? No. You need force and power, right? And that's what it does. Okay. Deity absolute king. Okay. Jill, you want to take the next one?
Sure. The deity absolute cannot, or at least does not, react to any universe situation in a sub-absolute manner. Every response of this absolute to any given situation appears to be made in terms of the welfare of the whole creations of things and beings, not only in its present state of existence, but also in view of the infinite possibilities of all future eternity.
So he doesn't just go out and react to anything, does he? You know, it's got to be something absolute for him to even make a motion towards anything. Pretty simple.
But all, all future possibilities throughout, I mean, that's just incomprehensible. It really is.
It really is. So it's got to be something major before he will act, right?
I mean, and just the idea
Or
that
react.
just the idea that a deity could actually comprehend all of that and synthesize it and make a decision is just
Unimaginable.
right.
Yeah.
It's just okay. The deity absolute is that potential which was segregated from total infinite reality by free will choice of the Universal Father, and within which all divinity activities, existential and experiential, take place. This is the qualified absolute in contradistinction to the unqualified absolute. But the universal absolute is superadditive to both in the encompassment of all absolute potential.
I find this interesting in the fact that that they say here the free will choice of the Father. Isn't that interesting? It's His choice that it be this way. And nothing existential or experiential takes place outside His will. You see that? And it talks about this is the qualified, the deity part, right? In contradistinction from the unqualified. But it goes on to say that the universal absolute is the superadditive. It's that glue. It brings them both together, doesn't it? Okay? And it encompasses all deity or all absolute potentials. Okay? Okay.
Number 2, the unqualified absolute is non-personal, extra-divine, and undeified. Unqualified absolute is therefore devoid of personality, divinity, and all creator prerogatives. Neither fact nor truth, experience nor revelation, philosophy nor obscenity are able to penetrate the nature and character of this absolute without universe qualification.
Isn't that interesting? It's devoid of personality, it's devoid of divinity, and all creative personalities. Isn't that interesting? And in order for it to act, it has to have qualification. Now, what is that qualification? That comes from the deity absolute and the qualified absolute, right? So in order for the unqualified to even act, do anything, it has to be what? Approved or appropriated from the universal absolute, right? So by itself it has nothing. It needs that
Has
divinity.
potential.
It has only potential. to have actuality, it has to have the deity absolute and the qualified absolute.
It's
Right?
almost like that's a storeroom or
That's a
storage.
That's a good point. It's like a storeroom of infinity. Isn't it?
Let it be made clear that the unqualified absolute is a positive reality, pervading the grand universe, and apparently extending with equal space presence on out into the force activities and prematerial evolutions of the staggering stretches of the space regions beyond the 7 superuniverses. The unqualified absolute is not a mere negativism of philosophic concept predicated on the assumptions of metaphysical sophistries concerning the universality, dominance, and primacy of the unconditioned and the unqualified. The unqualified absolute is a positive universe over-control in infinity. This over-control is space force unlimited, but is definitely conditioned by the presence of life, mind, spirit, and personality, and is further conditioned by the will reactions and purposeful mandates of the Paradise Trinity.
So we know it's not just a nothingness out there, right? It's an actual force, right? And for it to act, it's not a negative concept. It is the universe. It's a positive universe over control of infinity. So without it, we can't go out past where we are, can we? All right. But in order for it to do anything, it has to have what? Mind, body, personality. Where does those three things come from? The Trinity, right? So it has to have the will of God, the Trinity, for it to do anything, right? All right. 'Okay. Gilles, would you take the next one?
We are convinced that the unqualified absolute is not an undifferentiated and all-pervading influence comparable either to the pantheistic concepts of metaphysics or to the sometime either hypothesis of science. The unqualified absolute is force unlimited and deity conditioned, but we do not fully perceive the relation of this absolute to the spirit realities of the universes.
Okay, so it tells us what it's not first. It's not a pantheistic concept that God pervades everything, right? It's not that. Or it's not the ether, notice that, the ether hypothesis of science. It's not just this ether that's out there doing nothing, right? It's neither of those. It is a unlimited and deity-conditioned force, basically. Without the force, without the deity, it will not do anything, right? But it is an absolute. It is one of the 7 absolutes. So, okay. All right.
3. The universal absolute we logically deduce was inevitable in the universal Father's absolute free will act of differentiating universe realities into deified and undeified, personalizable and non-personalizable values. The universal absolute is the deity phenomenon indicative of the resolution of the tension created by the free will act of thus differentiating universe reality and functions as the associative coordinator of these sum totals of existential potentialities.
Okay, so now we're talking about what? We're talking about the universal absolute, right? This here. This is the glue, right? Takes the deity and the non-deity and brings them together, okay? Creates that tension to bring them together, basically, okay? We've just about beat that to death. I think something to do with that. Okay. Okay.
The tension presence of the universal absolute signifies the adjustment of differential between deity reality and undeified reality, inherent in the separation of the dynamics of free will divinity from the statics of unqualified infinity.
Okay, so it what? Creates the tension to bring deity and non-deity together, basically, again, right? Okay.
Always remember, potential infinity is absolute and inseparable from eternity. Actual infinity in time can never be anything but partial and must therefore be non-absolute. Neither can infinity of actual personality be absolute except an unqualified deity. And it is the differential of infinity potential in the unqualified absolute and the deity absolute that eternalizes the universal absolute, thereby making it cosmically possible to have material universes in space and spiritually possible to have finite personalities in time.
Okay, so it's part of this deity absolute that makes us possible in the first place. Do y'all see that? It's just that simple. It brings the, it goes on to say here too that this infinity out there, they keep talking about this infinity, it's nothing without these absolutes. You know, infinity and absolutes are totally different concepts. Infinity goes on forever. The absolutes have boundaries, don't they? And what is that boundary created by? God the Father, right? First source and center. Okay, and but this is what makes us possible as beings, basically, bringing these two things together. All right. Gio, did you take the next one?
Sure. The finite can coexist in the cosmos along with the infinite only because the associated presence of the universal absolute so perfectly equalizes the tensions between time and eternity, finity and infinity, reality potential and reality actuality, paradise and space, man and God. Associatively, the universal absolute constitutes the identification of the zone of progressing evolutional reality existent in the time-space and in the transcendent time-space universes of sub-infinite deity manifestation.
Okay, so this is really interesting here. You see this here? Let me get my pager here. That one won't work. Let me try this one. The finity can coexist only with the infinite because the associated present universal absolute so perfectly equalizes the tension between time and eternity, right? It's the universal absolute that makes us as finite beings possible with what? Infinite beings, right? It brings the finite in association with the infinite. And that's why they have all these comparisons here, right? Time and eternity, finity and infinity, reality, potential, and reality, actuality. We've studied all these, haven't we? Paradise and space, perfection, non-perfection, right? Man and God, perfection, non-perfection. What brings it together? Universal absolute. That's right. So you get that concept, you got the whole concept of what the universal absolute's about. That covers all the different aspects of it, right? Okay.
The universal absolute is the potential of the static dynamic deity, functionally realizable on time-eternity levels as finite absolute values and as possible of experiential existential approach. This incomprehensible aspect of deity may be static, potential, and associative, but is not experientially creative or evolutional as concerns the intelligent personalities now functioning in the master universe.
Okay, so it brings together another point here, the potential of static dynamic deity, right? Okay, on time, eternity levels as finite absolute values, possible of experiential and existential approach. This is again where it's taking two opposites and bringing it together, isn't it? You know, you look at the two opposites of each pole and it brings it right together. And it goes on to say this static potential in itself is not experientially creative or evolutionary as concerns the intellectual purpose of the people of the master universe, right? Now, what's interesting about this is it is part of this experiential trinity. We're going to go over that in just a second again. But it itself is not experiential. Do you see that? It's added to the universal absolute. It's a growth factor, okay? So it does not experience like the Supreme does it. It's part of that trinity because of the Supreme. Each part has its own aspect, right? Okay. Let me bring this down a little bit. Okay.
The absolute. The two absolutes, qualified and unqualified. While so apparently divergent in function as they may be observed by mind creatures, are perfectly and divinely unified in and by the universal absolute. In the last analysis and in the final comprehension, all three are one absolute. On sub-infinite levels they are functionally differentiated, but in infinity they are one.
Okay. So we just explained how they're separate. We're going to bring them all back together now, okay? That's what this slide's about, okay? The three manifestations of the Universal Father, right? The Universal Father, first person of deity, and primal non-deity pattern, okay? First, there's the qualified part. This is the deity part of God, right? He created this, the deity absolute. This is the non-deity part of God, the unqualified absolute, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have the unifier, the universal absolute, okay? But God created all three of these to act in what? Concession with each other. Can you have one without the other two? No. You can't have a qualified absolute without a deity absolute, right? And you can't have a universal absolute without an unqualified absolute, and vice versa. So what does that mean? That means these in actuality, these always act in conjunction with each other, don't they? So they're one. What else works the same way? Trinity. You know, they always act in conjunction with one another. You can't have one without the others, right? They each have their individual jobs and positions, right? But they always act in conjunction with one another. Would you not call that what? A Trinity, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you call that some kind of Trinity? I would think it would be something, wouldn't you? Some kind of Trinity? How about the experiential destiny absolutes Trinity?
How about that?
How about that? All comes together, doesn't it? We beat this little chart to death, haven't we? All right. And minimize this again. I may have gotten off track here on the other slides because I think it went forward on it. We never used the term. Yeah, it did. Hang on. Give me 1 second. There we go. Who's up next? You? There we go. Go ahead, you.
Put it near the
Oh,
screen. It's
sorry.
a little bit larger.
Yeah.
We never use the term the absolute as a negation of aught or as a denial of anything. Neither do we regard the universal absolute as self-determinative, a sort of pantheistic and impersonal deity. The absolute in all that pertains to universe personality is strictly Trinity limited and deity dominated.
So they don't ever act on their own, do they? They always act in concert and at the will of whom? The Paradise Trinity, right? Okay. The Trinities. Jill, would you take the first section on the Trinities, please?
Sure, the Trinities. The original and eternal Paradise Trinity is existential and was inevitable. This never-beginning Trinity was inherent in the fact of the differentiation of the personal and the non-personal by the Father's unfettered will and factualized when his personal will coordinated these dual realities by mind. The post-Havana Trinities are experiential, are inherent in the creation of two sub-absolute and evolutional levels of power personality manifestation in the master universe.
Okay, so we have basically a part of God the Father, universal Father, the spirit person and the non-personal self, right? So when he split himself and created the Son, right? Spirit person, the first original spirit person, right? At the same time, there had to be a non-personal self, paradise. What else is set up exactly the same way? Deity absolute, unqualified absolute, right? It's the same pattern. You have a spirit-led individual, a non-spirit-led. You see that? Okay. And that's what they're talking about, this personal and non-personal. And it's all due to the free will act of whom? The universal Father, right? And it goes on to say that these factualize his personal will in these dual realities. So are both of these real? Yes. Paradise, non-deity, is just as real as Spirit, the eternal Son, the Word. Right? Now let's go on one more past this. Oops, sorry. Let's go on. Come on. Okay, there we go. What else do we have? We had the conjoint actor, right? When this happened, what else happened? These two came together and created this, right? The conjoint actor. What is this? This is mind, right? And what? All matter. The controller of most matter, okay? So this, as soon as this appeared, what else happened? Havana, right? It sounds like it had to happen that way, doesn't it? It's inevitable that it happen that way. It just logical follows that if you had this and this, and you end up with paradise here, that when you had this and this and this, you'd have what? You'd have a personal side, and what else appeared? Havana, the non-personal side, right? Because these are the three primary deities. You can't create a new primary deity without having the personal and the non-personal. Havana is the non-personal for the spirit. See that? Is that not seeing that in your mind?
We are like that in a way as well.
Yeah, we are. We are like that in a way as well. We have a physical part, which is non-personal, and we have a personal part, right? But we not only have the personal part and personality part, we have the spirit from the Son and the mind from the, right? From the infinite spirit. So we have all the parts of the Trinity within us.
Creating a new being.
Creating a new finite being, right?
The Paradise Trinity, the eternal deity union of the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit, is existential in actuality, but all potentials are experiential. Therefore does this Trinity constitute the only deity reality embracing infinity, and therefore do there occur the universe phenomena of the actualization of God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and God the Absolute.
Okay, does this not sound like this is inevitable too? In other words, because these beings, the Paradise Trinity, okay, the union of the Father, Son, and the Spirit, is existential only in action. Existential in actuality, but all potentials are experiential. So the actual being of the Paradise Trinity are always actuals, aren't they? They always have been, always will be. But the experiential part of those three deities, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, are handed down to whom? The
God
Supreme.
the Supreme, God the Ultimate, God the Absolute.
Yeah. It's like they were inevitable too, doesn't it?
Mhm.
So do you see the importance of why the finite God, which is the God of the super universes, is just as important for the continuation of the experiential part of God? Right? Here we have God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, Paradise Trinity, eternity, right? Post-Havana epic would be experiential, right? Everything post-Havana and post-Havana is experiential due to God the Supreme, right? Okay.
Can I
Roger,
ask-
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have one too.
Okay, go
In
ahead.
the previous paragraph, in the last sentence, when they say the post-Havana trinities are experiential,
Right.
what are they referring to the post-Havana trinities? Are they referring to the supreme, the ultimate, or the absolute? Or are they referring to the qualified, unqualified, and universal
No,
absolutes?
they're talking about the God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and God the Absolute. Why do they call them post-Havana? Because pre-Havana, all that was needed was God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. The experiential part was not necessary yet, was it? It was when Havana started having beings in it, then the Supreme has to start developing, because at that point you have absonite beings. And they're not 100% perfect, are they? So the absonite beings needed a place to grow and needed a place to experience. But definitely, by the time you get past Havana, then you have God the Supreme, right? God the Ultimate and God the Absolute are developing yet. Even God the Supreme is not finished. But you had to have God the Supreme before that experiential part even kicked in.
Okay, and the three absolutes, qualified, unqualified, and universal,
Yeah.
are they considered trinities as well?
They're considered trinities as well. They're considered one of the 15 trinities. And on that chart I put up, it tells us the 7 known trinities and 8 unknown trinities. The 8 unknown trinities that they don't tell us about, we have no idea. We'll have to wait till we get to the Marancha worlds to find out. But the 7 they tell us about is part of that chart that I've been teaching you. Okay? The 7 known trinities. But
Okay.
that trinity of the deity absolute, the universal absolute, and the unqualified absolute goes not only through the Havana, but it goes out through all eternity. That's why they call them absolute trinities. They will always function all the way out through time. Okay. You have a question?
Yeah. Does the Absolute know about all this experience that hasn't taken place yet?
Yeah.
It just hasn't been actualized like it
It's
says
not
back
been
here.
actualized. That's right. That's the difference between the absolute and the supreme. The supreme is experiencing it. The absolute is existential, so it knows what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Okay, probably from God the Father. That's the difference. The supreme does not know. In other words, when the supreme started developing, it's just like me or you. Everything is new from that moment forward to God the Supreme. So it is constantly learning every single day. As spirituality expands, it's totally learning. Now, when the absolute God, the absolute comes into full fruition as the Trinity absolute, at that point, that experience will go into that absolute, right? Okay.
There is a part in the book that strikes my mind, but I wouldn't be able to tell you where it is, where basically they discuss exactly that point. And I remember something that they say we don't know whether they know beforehand everything that's going to happen, but it doesn't matter whether they do or they don't.
No, it really doesn't.
So it's an interesting question to ponder.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Who's next? Don? Oh.
thought it was somebody.
Oh, is it my
read-
turn?
Oh, yeah, I think it is. First and second.
Okay, the first and second experiential trinities, the post-Havona trinities, cannot be infinite because they embrace derived deities. Deities evolved by the experiential actualization of realities created or eventuated by the existential paradise trinity. Infinity of divinity is being ever enriched, if not enlarged, by finity and absonity of creature and creator experience.
Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we're talking about here. The first and second experiential trinities. The first being what involves the supreme. So the supreme is a derived deity, right? Okay. What's the second? Second level would be this up here. What's included in it? The supreme. Derived deity, right? So they are part of the experiential trinities, right? What's the third level? Third level is down here. And who's there? The supreme, right? So all three of these are first, second, and third experiential trinities. You follow me? And in order for that to happen, they are derived from experience, actualization of reality. In other words, these realities are coming into existence as we speak right now. Right? Okay. And it goes on to say here that the infinity of divinity is ever being enriched. It's learning constantly, right? If not enlarged by finity and obscenity of creature and creator experience. So it's getting experience from what? Finite beings. It's getting experience from absonite beings. Okay? Now keep this in mind. When we go on to the outer space levels, probably those beings will be some combination of that. Absonite and finite, right? So it'll get the experience of all three of those again, right? And eventually absolute. Okay. All right. Let me reduce this again. Got too many mice here. I'm infested with mice.
Don't say that.
Doesn't sound good.
No.
All right. Here we go.
Trinities are truths of relationship and facts of coordinate deity manifestation. Trinity functions encompass deity realities, and deity realities always seek realization and manifestation in personalization. God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and even God the Absolute are therefore divine inevitabilities. These three experiential deities were potential in the existential trinity, the Paradise Trinity, but their universe emergence as personalities of power is dependent in part on their own experiential functioning in the universes of power and personality, and in part on the experiential achievements of the post-Havona creators and trinities.
Okay, so these trinities, God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, God the Absolute, are inevitabilities, aren't they? Okay, and it's from at this point they will always be what? Experiential deities, because they're constantly expanding and they're constantly learning, right? And they have the potential of being what? Existential trinities. You see that? Okay. But it goes on to say that their personality of power is dependent on their own experience functioning in the universes of power and personality. And it's because of the experiential achievements of what? Us. Its children. Right? In the post-Havonic ethics. Okay.
The two post-Havona trinities, the ultimate and the absolute experiential trinities, are not now fully manifest. They are in process of universe realization. These deity associations may be described as follows.
Right. Go ahead and take the next paragraph too. Oh, sorry. You might want to read it.
1. The ultimate Trinity, now evolving, will eventually consist of the Supreme Being, the Supreme Creator Personalities, and the Absonite architects of the Master Universe. Those unique universe planners who are neither creators nor creatures. God the Ultimate will eventually and inevitably powerize and personalize as a deity consequence of the unification of this experiential ultimate Trinity in the expanding arena of the well-nigh limitless Master Universe.
Okay, so what are they talking about here? They're talking about this, right? God the ultimate Trinity, 7 creators, supreme creators, evolving supreme, and the architects of the Master Universe, right? Okay, let's go one more here. And this is a good picture of it, all right? So this is considered the ultimate Trinity. What does it involve? God the Supreme, big one up here. You see this? 7 master spirits, okay, 1 for each super universe. Supreme creator personalities, the creative mother spirits, you see that there? Creator sons, the ancients of days, and the architects of the Master Universe, who are not what? They are not creators, right? But they still are involved in creating this ultimate, right? Ultimate Trinity. Okay, and this is another look at it. The supreme creators in their divine unity of power and personality are constitutive and expressive of a new power potential of experiential deity. What would that be? The ultimate, right? And this power potential of experiential origin finds inevitable and an inescapable union in the experiential deity of the Trinity origin, the 7 supreme beings. Okay? Paradise creator sons, creative spirits, ancients of days, and the 7 master spirits again. Right? Alright. Let's keep going. Let me lower this a little bit here. Alright. The absolute Trinity. All right, Gio, would you take that one?
The absolute Trinity, the second experiential Trinity, now in process of actualization, will consist of God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and the unrevealed consummator of universe destiny. This Trinity functions on both personal and superpersonal levels, even to the borders of the non-personal, and its unification in universality would experientialize absolute deity.
Okay, so we're talking about down here, aren't we? We're talking about this Trinity inside the yellow, the absolute Trinity. You see that? The evolved supreme being, the eventuated ultimate being, and the consummators of universe destiny. They don't tell us a whole lot about this, but there is some information on page 11. But this is the absolute Trinity they're talking about. Okay? Good picture of that. Okay, and let's go one more over here. And this is another version of it, the absolute Trinity, the second experiential post-abundant Trinity. What makes it experiential? This right here, right? God the Supreme, God the Ultimate, and the unrevealed consummator of universe destiny. Okay? I didn't believe we'd get all the way through all these slides. And this is the large picture of that same thing in yellow by itself. Supreme Being, the eventuated ultimate consummator of universe destiny. Just got to keep beating this to death. Y'all will have nightmares about it. You remember it for sure. Okay, you want to take the next one?
The ultimate Trinity is experientially unifying in completion, but we truly doubt the possibility of such full unification of the absolute Trinity. Our concept, however, of the eternal Paradise Trinity is an ever-present reminder that deity trinitization may accomplish what is otherwise non-attainable. Hence do we postulate the sometime appearance of the Supreme Ultimate and the possible trinitization factualization of God the Absolute.
Okay. This is what we're talking about again, okay? The ultimate, well, nope, that's the wrong slide. I don't know how to make it. Well, let's go back over here to this one. I stuck a, I am human, believe it or not. I stuck a wrong slide in there. Well, I don't have it here. Let's see, the ultimate Trinity. Here it is, right here. Okay, right up here. The ultimate Trinity. You see this? This is what we're talking about. The seven supreme creators, the architects of the master universe, and the all supreme. That should have been that last slide. If I can remember it, I'll try to swap it out. And it goes on to say here that the deity trinization may accomplish what is otherwise not attainable. Why is that? Because it's the finite part that's adding to it, right? This seven supreme creators is the finite part along with the supreme and the architects of the master universe. This is the area, this is the group that plans out everything, right? Okay? And at some point they expect the ultimate supreme to appear from this trinitization process of the absolutes. Okay? Let's keep going. I think we just got a little paragraph, if I'm not mistaken. And we get the acknowledgement. Okay. Who's that? Gone?
The philosophers of the universes postulate a trinity of trinities, an existential, experiential trinity infinite, but they are not able to envision its personalization. Possibly it would equivalate to the person of the universal Father on the conceptual level of the I Am. But irrespective of all this, the original Paradise Trinity is potentially infinite, since the universal Father actually is infinite. The philosophers of the universes postulate
Oh, sorry.
a trinity
Sorry, dear, I did it too early. All right.
of trinities, an existential, experiential trinity infinite, but they are not able to envisage its personalization. Possibly it would equivalate to the person of the universal Father on the conceptual level of the I Am. But irrespective of all this, the original Paradise Trinity is potentially infinite, since the universal Father actually is infinite.
Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about this third level of trinities of trinities. We're talking about a trinity of trinities that encompasses all that we've been studying. See the red instead of the white around that? That's what they're talking about here. It encompasses all of everything that's known, the postulated I Am, right?
Ultimate integration of reality.
The ultimate integration of reality, right? Right now it's currently split into 7 absolutes of infinity, right? But that's what they're talking about evolving, the whole picture. That's why I redid this as a triangle, so that y'all can understand this is a trinity of trinities, right? Did it all come together and make sense now? All right, I want to read through this acknowledgement because this is, to me, one of the most important parts of the book, is the acknowledgement. So let's get through it real quick. And then we'll be done with the forward, believe it or not. You want to take the first part of it, Diane?
In formulating the succeeding presentations having to do with the portrayal of the character of the Universal Father and the nature of his Paradise associates, together with an attempted description of the perfect central universe and the encircling 7 superuniverses, we are to be guided by the mandate of the superuniverse rulers, which directs that we shall, in all our efforts to reveal truth and coordinate essential knowledge, give presence to the highest existing human concepts pertaining to the subjects to be presented. We may resort to pure revelation only when the concept of presentation has had no adequate previous expression by the human mind.
So they're telling us right at the beginning of these papers, aren't they, that this is a revelation from God, and this is put together in concert with the concepts of their supervisors, right? This is what we're allowed to tell you. We're going to draw everything we humanly can from people and only revert to revelation when there's no human concept to do this. What do you think all this forward has been? These aren't human concepts, are they? So that's why this forward was so important for us to study in such depth. The concepts that come after that, almost 100% human concepts, right? But they do reveal things to us when we don't have history of it, don't they? So from this paragraph, would you say this is, without a doubt, a revelation from God? To me it is. Okay? So let's keep going. Let's see what else they have to say about this. Jill, you want to take the next paragraph? You still out there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Successive planetary revelations of divine truth invariably embrace the highest existing concept of spiritual values as a part of the new and enhanced coordination of planetary knowledge. Accordingly, in making these presentations about God and His universe associates, we have selected as the basis of this paper more than 1,000 human concepts representing the highest and most advanced planetary knowledge of spiritual values and universe meanings. Wherein these human concepts assembled from the God-knowing mortals of the past and the present are inadequate to portray the truth as we are directed to reveal it, we will unhesitatingly supplement them for this purpose, drawing upon our own superior knowledge of the reality and divinity of the paradise deities and their transcendent residential universe.
Okay, so they have at least 1,000 concepts from human beings, right? Or these are concepts. This is the highest known spiritual values and knowledge in the planet, right? That's why this book is so important, above it all else. And then they will add to it when we don't have concepts for it, right? And they talk about the successive planetary revelations. What were they? Calagasta, right? Who was the second one? Adam and Eve. Who's the third? Melchizedek. Jesus. And the Urantia book, right? 5 revelations from God. This is the 5th one. Okay. All right.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah.
I think there are two, interesting connotations of these. Right? One is when they say that those 1,000 concepts from man or human mind, that means that those concepts come from the fruit of spiritual work with the spiritual means that we have, like the Spirit of Truth or the Father Adjusters and so on.
Right.
So that means that a lot of those concepts are attainable by basically experience and praying and worshiping and in our lives. Right?
That's right. And that's what this book is trying to teach us, isn't it, Gio?
Right.
Yeah.
If we think of Elijah or Enoch, that I believe are the first, possibly the first humans to fuse with a Father Adjuster, they didn't have the Urantia book.
No,
right?
no.
But they still came to
They found this out of their own experience, didn't they?
That's right. So so whatever the requirements are for adjuster fusion, well, they were able to achieve that without the Urantia book. Right?
That's right.
And without any other things that we have at our disposal to study and work on.
Yeah.
So that's one of the important aspects that that is the way I view it. The other one connotation that I see is the fact that they give preference to the human concepts
over their own. They do. Yeah, it states that they give preference.
They state that.
Yeah.
But they also state in conjunction that they state that they will supply pure revelation only when there are 2 conditions for supplying pure revelation. One is when there is a human concept that is not adequate.
That's right. They will supplement.
Is available.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And there's another condition that I see is that it has to be something related to one of the mandates.
Yeah.
Meaning that the way I interpret that is that if there is something that is not part of the mandate of the revelation of the Urantia book, but that is still related somehow, that they are talking about, for which there is a human concept that is flawed, it seems to me they are saying, in a way, that they may use the flawed human concept.
That's right, that's right. And they do that a lot in the science part of it, don't they? I mean, if you think about it, because they would not allow us to know the discoveries that we're going to make in science in the future, would they? That this was for a spiritual uplifting, right? Not to tell us how to build a box to create anything, right?
That's right.
That's right. So they have certain mandates they go by. And if y'all think about it, how special we should feel to the fact that Christ instigated this for us to learn about spiritual values. What a responsibility for us, because we've given this gift that's beyond imagination. We really have. And for us to share it is so important. You know. So, and they say here, you know, what's interesting, it says, all truth contributory to the enhancement of the ever-progressing reality of personal religious experience dash God consciousness. This is for our benefit, not for theirs. You know, this is totally for our benefit. Kind of interesting. Okay. Oh, we're on the, I was quoting from the next paragraph, I think.
This last paragraph.
Yeah, last paragraph. Okay.
We are fully cognizant of the difficulties of our assignment. We recognize the impossibility of fully translating the language of the concepts of divinity and eternity into the symbols of the language of the finite concepts of the mortal mind. But we know that there dwells within the human mind a fragment of God, and that there sojourns with the human soul the Spirit of truth. And we further know that these spirit forces conspire to enable material man to grasp the reality of spiritual values and to comprehend the philosophy of universe meanings. But even more certainly we know that these spirits of the divine presence are able to assist man in the spiritual appropriation of all truth, contributory to the enhancement of the ever-progressing reality of personal religious experience, God consciousness.
Okay, now think about this. They say that we have within us the Father fragment, part of God, right? And we have the Spirit of truth, right? What else do we have? We have the Holy Spirit, right? So if you open this book and you read it with the help of these spiritual influences, will you eventually understand it? Of course you will. You have 3 spirit influences helping you all the time. But you have to do what? You have to take the first step. You have to make the effort. Without the effort, you can't go anywhere, right? And that's what's tough. Now, when you share this book with folks and they just shut you down coldly and all this, you've done your job by introducing to them. It's that spirit that needs to convict them whether they're going to read it or not. It's not your job, right? All you do is share the truth, and it's this is God's work. He will take care of everything else, right?
Can't make them drink the water, can you?
Can't make them drink the water. You can take them to the stream, but you can't make them drink, right? All right, let me hit one more here. One thing I want to mention here. And 1 second here. And I'm going to read the last paragraph, okay? Edited by an Orvonton Divine Counselor, Chief of the Corps of Universe Personalities, assigned to portray on Urantia the truth concerning the Paradise deities and the universes of universes. We're talking about Orvonton Divine Counselor. See this here? Chief of the Corps of Universe Personalities. Super Universe Personalities. Does this guy know what he's talking about?
Yes, he does.
I would say so. Okay? So when you have people come up to you and say, this is wrong in the Urantia book, take them back to the end of this right here and say, listen, this is the guy that told us told them to do this. Take it up with him when you get to the mansion worlds. This is truth. I don't care what you say. Now you can, I know people say I'm over the edge believing in this book and all this stuff, but I believe this is true. I believe this statement. I do. I believe this is brought to us to share to the world, and that's what we're doing. Now, I don't know if y'all realize this. We have spent 9 weeks going over the foreword. You know that? Before that, we spent 11 weeks preparing to go over the foreword, right? So we spent 20 weeks on just this foreword, right? The reason we spent that much time, I think it's the most important part of the book.
And the most complicated and hard
It
to
is the most
understand.
hardest to understand, the most complicated. But you can see now that y'all understand that how it prepares you for everything that follows, doesn't it? And if you take the time to learn this, as we read through the book, it becomes easier and easier and easier. It does. You know?
Thank you, Roger, so much for everything you've done.
My pleasure. It's my job, man. Listen, thank you at home, everyone that's listened to these tapes. I really appreciate it. I'm reloading all the tapes because I had a typo in all of them. I am human. But they'll be out there the next couple days. And I want to thank everybody that's stuck in there with us on everything. It's been my pleasure to do it. Let's have a little prayer and we'll quit for the night. Diane, would you pray for us?
Dear Heavenly Father, Mother God, we thank you so much for this opportunity to have had the time and to go over the foreword and to learn it and to become acquainted with the overall picture of the whole entire Urantia book to help us to learn the rest with more ease, more comprehension. We just thank you so much for this opportunity. We thank you for the individuals that have participated all throughout this experience. We thank you for this day, and thank you for each other, and thank you for our families and loved ones and friends. And may we continue to gather together and to continue to learn the balance of the book. It is in your name, Jesus, Michael of Nebelheim, that we pray and give thanks. Amen.
Amen. Thank you at home for joining us. God bless you. Please come listen to us again.